Okay, so you're going to start by taking Cornell notes. So start by putting a line towards the left side of your paper. And at the top right-hand corner of your paper, you're going to record your name, the date, and your class period. The title of your notes is Row Operations. And at the top, you're going to write the outcome. I can perform row operations. The notes that follow go in the right column. For now, we're going to leave the left column and the summary blank. So there are three main row operations. You can either switch rows. Secondly, you can multiply a row by a non-zero number. So we call it a scalar. You just can't use 0. And lastly, you can add any two rows. So these are the three operations that you're allowed to make on a matrix. So let's look at an example. So here we have an augmented matrix, and I can switch any of the rows. Whenever you perform a row operation, you're going to record what you did. So I would write, I'm going to switch row 1, row 2. So I'm going to write, I'm going to switch row 1 and row 2. So the symbol for row 1, row 2 is R1, R2. And the symbol for switching is an arrow with 2 arrowheads. So if I switch row 1 and 2, that's going to look like this. So instead of going 1, 1, 1, 4 across the top, it's going to go 2, -1, 3, 1 across the top. And then row 1 moves down to row 2. And then row 3 doesn't change. So this is an example of switching row 1 and row 2. The next operation is that you can multiply any row by a scalar. So for example, I can take row 3 and I can multiply it by any scalar, positive or negative. I just can't multiply it by 0. So I'm going to pick the number 5. So I'm going to take 5 times row 3, and I'm going to put it right back into row 3. It's not going to go anywhere. So rows 1 and 2 don't change this time. And then in row 3, every single element in row 3 gets multiplied by 5. So it becomes 10, -20, +20, and -30. Remember to multiply every single element, including that last element. So there's the second operation, multiplication by scalar. The third operation is that we can add two rows together. So for this example, let's add row 1 and row 3. Now, where am I going to put that answer? I have a choice. It can either go in row 1 or it can go in row 3. Notice it cannot go in row 2 because row 2 is not one of the rows that I'm adding. So row 1 or row 3, I'm going to choose to put it into row 1. Arbitrary decision. It could have also gone into R3. It's going into R1, so R1 is the only row that will look different from the original. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and write in the rows that don't change. So I know that row 2 and row 3 aren't going to change. So I'm going to put those in there first. And then row 1 is going to change, and it's going to be the sum of row 1 and row 3. So I'm going to add the elements that are in the same column. So I'm going to add the 1 and the 2, the 1 and the -4, and so on and so on. So the first element will be 1 plus 2, which is 3. The second element will be 1 plus -4, which is -3. The next element will be 1 plus 4, which is 5. And the last element, 4 plus -6. And that's the third and final row operation. Now, what you've just seen is each operation done in isolation. You can combine more than one row operation at once. So for example, let's do R3 minus 2R1. And let's put the answer in R3. Now you might notice I used a minus sign, and you might be saying, wait a second, we did not talk about subtraction. We only talked about addition. Addition is the only row operation. So really what's happening is I'm multiplying R1 by the scalar -2. Subtracting is the same thing as saying plus -2 R1. So I'm multiplying R1 by the scalar -2, and then I'm adding that row with row 3. So to start, I'm going to notice row 3 is the only row that's changing. So I'm going to start by recording row 1 and row 2 because they don't change. Okay, so now for each element in the row, I'm going to take the element in row 3 minus 2 times the element in row 1, and then I'm going to put that answer here in row 3. So the first element in row 3 is 2. Here, I'll write the equation that I'm doing over here. And the first element in row 1 is 1. So 2 minus 2 times 1 is 0. Next, we have -4 minus 2 times 1. That's -6. Then we have 4 minus 2 times 1, which is 2. And then lastly, -6 minus 2 times 4. So -6 minus 8, which is -14. So that's what it looks like when you combine more than one row. All of this to the side, this is your work on the side, doesn't need to be shown. This is what you need to show. You need to show the row operation and then the matrix with the row operation being performed. So for the last piece of your notes, I'm going to give you the exact same matrix, and I'm going to have you do one on your own. You do not need to feel confident about this. This is just for you to try. And we're going to start class by looking at this problem. So on your own, I want you to try 2R1 minus R2 into R2. And I'm going to go ahead and put the answer here so that you can check your work. You know if you're on the right track. It's okay if you don't get it just yet. We will begin class by talking about this problem. Once you have this problem in your notes, these notes are finished and you're going to put your line across the bottom for your summary, but you're not going to write anything just yet.